Well, I've been interested in photography since I was about 10. I used my mother's box camera, but the interesting part about it was I used it to try and take bird pictures because I like to draw birds, and they wouldn't hold still for me. So eventually I decided, well, the box camera isn't going to work, so I bought a single lens reflex and a telephoto lens. This was when I was 12. So I could get bird pictures so I could draw the birds. Well, while I was doing that, out taking pictures, I just got so interested in the landscape too, and just being out, so I would shoot everything. And I think that's how I got interested in photography. I am a painter. I work as an artist. I paint and I draw for a living, and I still take pictures, and most of the pictures in the exhibit are right on my acreage. The landscape is usually our pasture and looking across the valley. There is one picture that's not from the acreage, but most of them are. And we got lots of birds, and we have some native prairie pasture, so we have a lot of flowers and the birds in the pasture and insects and things like that. So it's good subject matter out there. It was just by experiment. I mean, this was in 1962, and I ordered the camera from Chicago, from the Olden Camera Company, and they're not in existence anymore. And I just bought a roll of film and started taking pictures, and the ones that didn't come out, I just had to figure out why. So I didn't have a meter, light meter or anything, and I got to be able to just judge light by just experience, you know. Later on, I did start using a light meter because the film got more expensive. I went up to large format. I was shooting 4x5 with a field camera, and if you botched one of those, you lost $5. Film and processing, $5. So I got very careful. And then I kind of graduated to medium format because it was less expensive, but it was still a large format film. And then eventually digital came out, and I snapped it right up. I was one of the earliest ones. The first really flagship digital camera for professionals was Nikon. It was the DX or the D1. And I bought the D1X, and that's where I got into digital. And I thought it was great because if I botched a shot, it was just digital. You just erase it. Plus, you could see as you were shooting what you were getting. And you couldn't ever do that except sometimes with a large format camera with a 4x5, I would use a Polaroid holder. If it was a very important shot, I only had maybe one chance, I would do a Polaroid proof first to see if I was getting what I thought I was. And then I would use the real film. So that was kind of the analogy, the early form of digital, only it wasn't digital. Well, I treat it just like the darkroom because I worked in the darkroom for years and years. And in fact, my first job was in a darkroom doing professional work for the government and for the military. And it was all black and white film back then. And I just learned how to make prints for mine and how to dodge and burn and things like that on the print under the easel under the enlarger. And I treat digital the same way. If the sky's not dark enough, I darken it. If the clouds are too bright, I try to suppress that. Of course, you know, it depends on your digital file. If there's no information on the digital file, you're stuck. But you know, I've learned I just shoot in RAW, which gives you a lot of leeway. If it looks blown out, you can still bring it back to a point. It's not like magic, you know. There's a limit. And if your shadows are blocked up on the print, when you were printing under the enlarger, you would just dodge those areas so not as much of the light from the enlarger would hit the paper there, so it wouldn't be as dark. Well, digital, you just move the the cursor or whatever over a little bit, and it lightens that area, and so it's just like printing, except it's on the computer now. If I'm painting and having an issue with a certain type of medium, I'll just go on the internet and go to a YouTube where the artist is talking about that, and I'll go, oh, okay, so then I'll try his idea. It's the same thing with digital photography. There's so many programs out there. I mean, there's thousands of them. If it were a landscape, I would just want to make sure that the shadows were open enough to see into them, because that's the way your eye perceives things, and the highlights aren't blown out to where there's nothing there. And I kind of treat that with all the pictures that I take. I just make sure the highlights aren't blown away and that the shadows are open, yet there's still really nice darks, and there's still some really good vibrant highlights. And I do a lot of landscapes, but I also do prairie, because our pastures are all native prairie pastures. And I've kind of become a prairie buff, where I really like to know what I'm seeing. And so when I pick up a plant, I describe it as not just the common name, but the scientific name. And we don't have any plants in our pasture that are non-native. They're all native to our area. A lot of them were there to begin with, and after burning the pasture a few years, they come back. And of course, the birds that come around, I started with birds to begin with, so I like to photograph them too, as well as paint or draw them. And the insects in the pasture, like the butterflies and the pollinators, and I kind of stick to the neighborhood. I will go a few miles down the road sometimes, but usually I just take pictures in our own pastures in the yard. I get kind of lazy, like this brown thrasher. I'm sitting at my computer and he's right out the window, so I have my camera sitting next to me all the time, so I just turn around and take the picture right through the window.
That's the key, isn't it? To have your camera with you.
Yeah. And to have something that will attract the birds or the insects, the butterflies, and the flowers. If you have the right habitat, I always put a lot of plants around the buildings and stuff, so that they'll stay next to the building, because they'd like to be out of the wind. And if it's on a windy day, they're always on that side. Or if the wind's from that way, they're on that side. So it's like when I was a kid and I was trying to get bird pictures to begin with. I would put bird feeders out in the yard, and I would sit under a little blanket out in the yard with my camera sticking out the hole, and I'd put sticks around the feeder so the birds would land on the sticks, and I'd take their picture on the sticks, So I haven't changed that much. I still do the same thing, except now I just plant bushes and they land in the bush. But I will prune the bushes, because if there's too many branches, they're usually behind one. So I just like whatever's out there. If it's out in nature, natural history, that's what I really like to do. Commercial with people, then there's some good schools around. There's one over in Sheldon, there's one over in Waterloo, there's probably others. If it's commercial, they probably still have, like, say, product photography or something. They probably still have classes for that. That'd be probably the smartest way. If you're working at something now and you can't afford to quit and go to school, then I would just spend your evenings looking into it, digging up information on the computer. There's a lot of programs out there that talk about it.